Okay, so I left a couple of things out of my review. So consider this, an extra or a part two of talking about Dune, the first book in Frank Herbert's iconic series, right? Let's talk about the fact that the Atreides and the Harkonnens are related by blood, right? And I thought initially this didn't surprise me because I thought, okay, this is a feudal political system they're working with here. They got big houses and small houses, you know, and they have some sort of emperor. So when I found out that those two houses were related, I thought, okay, so that means that logically, all of the houses, at least the big houses, must be related to one another because that is how royalty operates, right? And what I mean by that, if you didn't know, I'm going to tell you royalty has always been all of royalty, no matter the country. They have all been related to one another since the beginning by blood. It's an incestuous, an inbred method to retain power, right? So this didn't surprise me in Dune that the Atreides and the Harkonnens are related, right? And it turns out that not even Jessica knew that Vladimir Harkonnen was her father, I think. Her father, right? Not her grandfather, her father. So Baron Harkonnen is Jessica's father. She did not know that because the Benny Jesuits, uh, they take care of these things, right? And the rest of the Atreides, Leto and Paul, they did not know that they are somehow related to the Harkonnens. They're arch nemesis, right? Which is hilarious because this entire book, uh, is about the Harkonnens and the Atreides fighting, right, for supremacy. Another thing that I didn't mention, because I don't really remember why this is, but why does the Emperor Padish, I think that's his name, why does he get rid of Leto? You know, is he a count? Count Leto. Why does the Emperor want to get rid of Leto with the assistance of Baron Harkonnen, Duke Leto? Yeah, he's a duke, right? So I don't understand why uh, the Emperor tries to get rid of and succeeds in getting rid of Duke Leto with Harkonnen, because as it turns out, the Atreides house is related by blood to the Emperor, right? I think they're cousins or something like that. So Duke Leto has a legitimate claim to the throne, but as we read the book, uh, Duke Leto is satisfied with being a duke and serving his empire, his emperor. So, he is loyal. From what I can tell from his character, he is loyal to the emperor, right? He is about duty and being moral and all of that. So, I don't know. I think the emperor made a great mistake by getting rid of Leto with the assistance of the Baron Harkonnen, because I think, of course, I think it is mentioned that Harkonnen somehow seduced and corrupted the emperor by saying, by whispering that the Duke Leto Atreides, he might want to be emperor because he has legitimacy, which isn't true, right? which isn't true. And another thing, I began reading the second book, uh, Dune Messiah, and in the beginning, uh, it is, spoilers, Paul becomes emperor, and there's a conspiracy to dethrone him, and they say that he isn't legitimate, right? Which is false because, as we find out in the first book, that the Atreides are related not only to the Harkonnens, but they are related to the Emperor. So Jessica is related to the Harkonnens, and Duke Leto is related to the Emperor Padish, the Carino family. So that makes Paul becoming the Emperor legitimate in my mind, right? Let's talk about the Benny Jesuits, right? The Benny Jesuits aren't that terrifying to me. I don't know. I watched a couple of videos, and they said that the Benny Jesuits are terrifying entities. And of course, I've just finished the first book. I've started the second, so maybe something happens in the future books, in the other books. But as of this moment, I can tell you that, as far as I can tell, the Benny Jesuits aren't terrifying to me. They don't scare me, right? And what I want to ask is, the Benny Jesuits, I mean, do they have supernatural powers, or is their power simply, honing their skills and their talents, and just, training themselves to be mentally, physically, especially the psyche, right? The mental abilities, is it just that, right? Because they have crazy control over their mental abilities, And what I want to ask is it just mental, right? Is it just mental, or is it a bit supernatural? I don't know, right? I've just finished the first book. We'll see. But it's interesting, right? Because they have this allure, this mystic allure, that of shamans, basically, right? So shamans can somehow, somewhat interact with the invisible, right? The invisible, the invisible energy, right? What else? Like I said, the problem with Dune is that it focuses too much on these Fremen people, and it's not interesting. I think that is a big turnoff to many people who might read this book. Because, like I said in my first part, in my first review, the Fremens are basically, they're not even characters. They're not even characters. They don't have a rich culture. They don't have, an interesting tradition. They don't have a history. They don't even have a mythology. So there's nothing really interesting about them. I mean, in my case, I got bored of them really fast, right? The setting itself, Dune, Arrakis, and the cities there, the capital, the oldest capital, and so forth. Again, they are extremely bland, extremely plainly written. There's nothing exotic about them, right? There's nothing really mysterious or mystical. You don't feel the richness of the culture, uh, of the traditions, right? There's no way for me to be immersed in this Arrakis, especially in the cities, and not even in the desert when we're surviving with the Fremens, right? But maybe that will change in the other books. I hope it does. And since we're on the topic of the Fremen, the free men, right? The free people, the Fremen. I have a I have a serious problem with the Fremens, right? Because all they do is barely survive. They are semi-nomadic. All they do is hunt for food, for water, for shelter. They hide a lot, right? And they plant and they accumulate water in these reservoirs in order to hey, re-terraform Dune, because of course it's a desert planet, and their dream is to make it a lush green place to live where everybody has enough water to go around, right? But of course that's never gonna happen. That's an insane plan, right? The way they go about it to me is it is extremely flawed. Right? So one problem I have with the Fremens is that they they don't mind, not really, their horrible conditions. They don't complain about it. And yes, that is a respectable trait. The fact that they don't complain and they don't whine and they're people of action and they just get over it and do what needs to be done, that's respectable. But at the same time, you know, I wish that in the Fremen tribes, I wish there was at least one Fremen that just was different, right? Just one. Give me one outsider, just one weirdo, right? And what I mean by that is just give me one Fremen person that just stands up in the middle of this crowd and just shout out, "Listen, bro, I'm tired of this stupid bullshit. I'm tired of drinking my own piss and sweat to survive. I'm tired of wearing this stupid suit. I'm tired of just being nomadic. I'm tired of being hunted and genocided by the Harkonnens, right? I'm tired of our stupid beliefs that are primitive. Fuck all of you, right?" And he just fucks off, but nobody there. There's a cohesion, right? They are a one-mind congregation. There are no dissenters, right? Nobody seems to be at odds with how they live their lives, right? I, you know, uh, you are born in your environment, and you have to endure it. But at the same time, you don't have to like it. At least, you do what you gotta do, but you shouldn't just like it, right? So that's a problem that I have with the Fremens. That there's nobody in this. I mean, there are millions of Fremens, not one that's different, right? There should be at least one that just stands up and just says, listen, bros, this the way we live our lives in this desert, in this wasteland, being hunted and killed by the Harkonnens. I'm sick and tired. Fuck all of you. This is not for me. And he or she leaves. I wish I would have seen that. And another thing with the Fremens. Another thing with the Fremens. Uh, so we learn in the book that the Fremens, they gather a lot of spice melange and they bribe the space guild so that their main desert, isn't surveilled by satellites, right? Because then it would be exposed just how many they are, right? And what they do, which is mainly gather this spice in order to bribe the guild, right? So here's my problem, right? Yet again, it is related to my first problem with the Fremen. Uh, you know, why don't the Fremen gather enough spice melange and just pay the Space Guild so that the Space Guild, you know, picks up the Fremens and takes them somewhere else, to a lush planet somewhere else where they won't be bothered. Why don't they do that? Right? Maybe you can answer this question. I don't remember from the book if this topic is tackled, right? Why don't they just pay the Space Guild with spice so that they can be whisked away somewhere where there's enough water and so forth? Another planet, because as we find out in the book, uh, the Fremens, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember, the Fremens aren't native or indigenous to Arrakis Dune, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember, the Arakeen, or the Fremens, they come from another planet, and they left that planet because there was war, and they stopped on another planet, and then they came to Dune, right? So they are not native to Arrakis. Right? They've not only been nomadic on Arrakis, but they've been nomadic for thousands of years from planet to planet before arriving at Dune, right? So why don't they pay the Space Guild to take them away from this miserable, deserted wasteland? It doesn't make any sense to me. Like I said, it also doesn't make any sense to me that not one Fremen is bothered by their lifestyle of just barely surviving, right? It doesn't make any sense. Another thing that I would like to tackle is the way the first book ends. So the ending, right? The ending is bizarre to me because it just stops randomly, right? It just stops randomly. So the story ends, Paul and the Fremen the defeat the Harkonnens, and they captured the Emperor. And just like that, Paul becomes Emperor by marrying Emperor Padishah's daughter, Irulan, or something like that, Irulan, right? And it just stops randomly at a conversation between Lady Jessica and Chani, right? That's how the book mainly ends, right? It's just so random. It just leaves you. Wait, we're done? We're done? That's the ending, right? A conversation between two secondary characters. That is the ending of the first book, Dune, right? I mean, it doesn't even end, on a highlight, like, Paul becomes emperor and that's that. It just ends randomly. And then we have some extra stuff that, doesn't really matter. It's nice, but it doesn't really matter, right? The ending is bizarre and random to me, right? Let's talk about Paul, because in my first review, I didn't really tackle him thoroughly, right? Uh, Paul has been trained by his mother, Lady Jessica, in the secrets of the Benny Jesuits, because Lady Jessica, his mother, is also a Benny Jesuit, uh, and Lady Jessica has been trained by a top level Benny Jesuit. I forgot her name, but she's the top bitch, right? So Paul is instructed. He is trained. He is skilled, right? So he has an extreme mind, right? And because he is the he is the chosen one. He is uh, what's the title? I always forget his title. The Hazarak, right? He is Al Gaib. He is Muad'Dib, right? He is the chosen one, the one that can be in many places at once, right? So he is special. He is not just some child. He is extremely trained. But at the same time, even though he has this mind, he has these childish outbursts here and there, and I don't mind them. But to me, from a narrative standpoint, it doesn't make any sense because he has been tempered like steel with these teachings, right? For him to control his emotions, for him to be, mature, for him to be in complete control over himself, over his senses, over his muscles, over his nerves, over his mind. But yet, even though he has those qualities, he still has these childish outbursts here and there. And with Paul Atreides, Muad'Dib, there is there's this speculation that he is, in some sense, a Gary Sue, right? Like a Mary Sue. He is a Gary Sue, meaning that he is pretty much perfect. He doesn't really need to struggle. He doesn't really need to learn a lot of things. He doesn't have to train. And some readers might say that he is a Gary Sue. Now, in a very mild sense, he is a Gary Sue. But let me counter with this, right? Because from a narrative standpoint, he cannot be a Mary Sue because we learn that he has been trained not only in the Benny Jesuits school by his mother, but he also has been trained by three, uh, experts, right, at arms and so forth. So he cannot be a Mary Sue in totality because he has been trained. He has struggled. He has thought. He has trained, right? He didn't just wake up and he had all of these talents and skills, right? Which is the definition of a Mary Sue, Gary Sue, right? So, uh, in my mind, Paul cannot be a Gary Sue. He cannot be a. If you read the book, if you understand the narrative, he cannot be a Gary Sue in totality. But at the same time, he kind of is in a mild way because after his father gets killed, he escapes with his mother, and that is where the Gary Sue label sticks because, you know, he escapes a terrible storm that should have killed him. He's a 15-year-old boy, but he can fight adults without a problem. Uh, right? He has all of these challenges, and he succeeds. He triumphs. He ends up victorious without much effort. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Which rubs me the wrong way. Right? So my argument is, yes, he has been trained, he has struggled, he has fought, he has endured, he has learned, he is skillful, but that does not mean that he does not need to still struggle, learn, train, and so forth. Life is a constant path of constant learning and achieving and struggling and so forth, right? But after he escapes, he doesn't really struggle anymore. Not really, because he is the chosen one, right? I mean, he trained with Hawat, and with Halleck, and with Duncan, Idaho, which I like to call, Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, that name is just ridiculous, right? Ridiculous. Dunkin' Donuts, Idaho, right? Just random, random. He has no real problem fighting adults in their own style, in their own traditions, right? No problem at all. He can defeat adults. And at the end, he's a bit older, but he's still very young, and he fights one of the nephews of Baron Harkonnen, and he gets cut with a blade that is poisoned, right? So he is poisoned, but because of his Benny Jesuit excellence, and because that he is awakening as Muad'Dib, he can he can neutralize the poison in his bloodstream with his mind by altering the way his body works at a cellular level, right? And that is a bit OP, but he is the chosen one. See, uh, it is strange. His status is strange because he is not a Mary Sue, but at the same time he is a Gary Sue, right? He, in a sense, he is, right, because he can neutralize poisons in his bloodstream, right? And he doesn't really have a problem with taking over the leadership of the Fremen tribes, and I mean all of the Fremens. There is a bit of resistance from certain Fremens, the leaders, Kynes and Stilgar, right? A few leaders of the Fremen tribes, they're only a bit resistant to letting him be Muad'Dib, but that quickly changes. So they test him, right? Trials. But Paul succeeds very easily. And by the end of the book, the Fremens, all of them basically, they just worship him. They adore him like a god, like a prophet, like a saint, right? And yet again, this is one of my gripes is that not one Fremen is different. Not one dares to be different, an outsider. No one dares from the Fremen tribes to stand up and just negate and deny what these people are about. I mean, nobody says, listen, bro, I don't care about this guy being the chosen one, right? I want to get off this planet. What we're doing here is dumb. We will never turn this Arrakis desert planet into a lush green jungle, right? We should just pay the guild and get the fuck out of here, right? And Paul has these visions of the jihad that is universal, that is, it does not happen in a solar system, in a galaxy, it happens all over the universe. And all of this fighting will happen because of him, because he is Muad'Dib, and he can stop it. But you know, from the foreshadowing, we understand that the jihad cannot be stopped in any way whatsoever, right? Whatsoever. And Paul, let me tell you, one of his flaws is that he doesn't really try his hardest to uh, avoid the jihad that is universal. And I'm talking about billions of lives lost, right? So he is a bit scared. He is a bit, put off by this jihad that billions of people would fight and kill in his name all over the universe, right? He kind of is upset by it, but by the end, and even throughout the book, he doesn't really try anything to stop this jihad. Not really, right? He doesn't really try. And I've started the second book, Dune Messiah, and again we have the foreshadowing, that the jihad will indeed happen. And it seems to me that Paul doesn't really mind it. But we'll have to see, right? Because I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens, right? Baron Harkonnen should have been a better villain, right? He seemed like he had a shrewd, clever intellect. It seemed to me that he was more capable than he let on, but by the end, you know, by the end of the book, he is just a joke, right? He gets clapped by a 4-year-old girl, right? Assassin's Creed style, right? Which was hilarious. He got what he deserved, but I wish that he would be a bit more capable, right? Because he, as a villain and as a character in this book, he stood out to me. But he just, he gets defeated you know, uh, like a chump, right? Like a chump. Uh, Lady Jessica should have been more polished, more fleshed out. She does well what her character is supposed to be, but I wish that she would be more vocal and more active, right? In the first book, she is all right. She is average. In a book that most characters are below average, right? Uh, I've seen the trailer for the new Dune movie, and the trailer places great emphasis on Chani. Chani, who will become Paul's Fremen wife at the end of this book. But I don't understand why Chani is so emphasized in the trailer. Because Chani doesn't really do anything. Chani doesn't really do anything. She, at the end, just becomes another devoted follower of Paul, Muad'Dib, Usul, uh, you know, maybe in future books. I don't know. In this book, she is below average to me, right? And also, in the trailer, it seems that Paul has visions or dreams about Chani, which is foreshadowing. And I think I remember that in the book, in the beginning, he also has dreams about her, but I just really don't understand why there's so much emphasis placed on Chani. Paul has dreams and visions about her. The trailer, a good chunk of the trailer is about Chani, right? And I don't understand why she is so important to the story or to the characters. I don't understand why she is so emphasized, right? To me, she is a bland character. And when we first meet her, I kind of liked her because she had this boisterous, she had this. Uh, she teased Paul a lot, right? Right? And I liked that about her because she wasn't this adoring fan, right? She teased him, she put him in his place, which was, of course, a fresh breeze of air. Because pretty much everybody worships this guy, this kid, and Chani was, the Chani was the exception to the rule, but she quickly becomes just another fangirl, basically, right? What else? Let's talk about the political aspects of this book. So the governmental hierarchy here is a sort of, like I said, a sort of feudal, uh, aristocratic style of government, right? We have big houses, we have small houses. They're kind of related to one another. Uh, but I wish there would be some sort of, different or unique type of government. We don't really find a lot about this type of government in this universe. Not really. Uh, there's barely anything in here, and it is very stale. Uh, I wish that the government structure would have been a bit unique, right? And they have this emperor, Padish from the Corino family. And I thought he would be, when he would be revealed, which he is revealed at the end, but he would be a badass, but he isn't. He is just another chump, and he is more interested in bureaucracy than, anything else. He is a chump. He is nothing special. He is boring, and he gets easily defeated and dethroned, and then by the end he is exiled, and Paul takes over as emperor, right? And his family, the Carinos, were, I don't know how many generations of emperors, right? A lot. And he gets easily dethroned, you know. Uh, You know, a lot of disappointments with this book. Uh, what else? What else? All right, let's talk about the sandworms. The sandworms are awesome. I think they are the highlight of this book, with the spice, right? So the worms and the spice are the highlights of this book, basically. The worms should have been, like I said in my previous review, part one. I said that the worms should have been some sort of semi-deities in this book. They should have been, in a way, worshipped by the Fremens, right? As a sort of deity, a primitive deity, right? But the sandworms are reduced to, I don't know, these creatures that are transportation for the Fremen. Uh, it is disappointing. It is lackluster. So from what I understand, I don't know how the sandworms come to be, right? But we find out that they are little sandworms, and the little sandworms usually get cannibalized by their bigger brothers and sisters, right? So there are very few worms that become, the big ones, the big boys, that are miles long, right? Because they usually get eaten by the other worms that are bigger. But we find out that if you capture one of these little worms, you can drown that worm in water, and that worm releases a sort of highly potent poison, which the Fremens worship or adore, or, they are in awe of this poison, right? And if you take this poison, and if a Benny Jesuit, right, or the Fremen equivalent of a Benny Jesuit, drinks this poison, it becomes what they call the water of life, right? So the Bene Gesserit can transform the water into the poison into the water of life. So what is the water of life? Because it is not really explained, right? So what I get from this is that the water of life transformed by Jessica, you know, becomes a highly potent uh, liquid form of the spice melange. It is a psychotropic drug in liquid form. That's what I get from it, right? But, correct me if I'm wrong on this. This is just my speculation. So this water of life that seems to me to be some sort of super drug, even more potent than the spice melange, uh, you know, and everybody, drinks it basically as a sort of communion or what have you, right? But it isn't really explained what this thing is and what it does, right? Because obviously, if it comes from the worm, it has to be some sort of psychotropic drug, like the spice melange, right? And let's talk about the spice melange for a bit, right? I said in my previous video that there should be consequences to the spice melange, right? The Fremens have eaten this substance for who knows how many generations, thousands and thousands of years, right? And they have absolutely no repercussions from being addicted to this drug that gives you, some sort of insight, a special ability of the mind, right? You get blue eyes, you become addicted, and you have to continue eating the spice or you'll die. That is the only setback, the only consequence, or the only side effect to eating the substance is that you have to continue eating it, right? And as I said, you can solve this issue by staying on Arrakis or having a continuous supply of spice. So there is no consequence to the spice melange, and I just like saying spice melange, right? The geriatric spice, you know. So to me, this is the mistake that the writer Frank Herbert made regards to the spice, because the Fremens, they just eat it up like it's nothing, right? They just ate it for breakfast, for lunch. They drink the waters of life. There is no real effect that could be dangerous or harmful, not at all, right? Which is peculiar, right? Because this is a highly addictive drug, and there should be side effects, right? You should have people that go insane from using it. There should be overdoses. They should have, nightmares, horrible visions. They should change, at least mentally, if not physically, right? They should have, children that are weird, children that are strange. If you get old, you might have some sort of mental problems like Alzheimer's, something. Children should be born with mutations of some sort, right? They should become less human, or something. There should be something that should should be a warning to all people who consume this spice, that there might be a chance, at least 50-50, that something might happen to you, right? you know and not just blue eyes and a bit of insight. People should have some sort of adverse reaction to the spice, right? Something health wise, uh, physical, mental, emotional, something needs to happen. You know, the fact that they've consumed this for generations and generations should have some sort of change upon their genetic structure. Somehow, something has to happen, right? But I don't know. This is what I get from the first book. Maybe this will happen in the other books, right? And I still don't understand how this spice comes about, right? Because I thought that the worms, the sandworms, produced the spice as a sort of waste, right? I thought, my theory was that the worms, they suck up all the water of the desert, and they turn it into this essence that it turns out to be a psychotropic drug. But that is not the case, because the worms die if they come in contact with the water, right? So the spice is a mystery. I don't understand how it comes to be, because from what I remember, the spice, just appears in the desert. A patch of the desert becomes a bit brown, darker, and that is the signal that spice is beneath that patch of desert. So is the spice a natural result from natural phenomenon in the earth, in Arrakis, in the desert, right? And what's the deal with the worms being so interested and so territorial and so possessive of this spice? Because whenever a patch of spice appears on the desert, the worms aren't that far away. They come and they want it, and they want to protect it from people, right? So what's the deal with the worms and the spice, right? Why do the worms want this spice so badly? Why are they so possessive, so territorial of the spice, right? And this would be a nice addition to the story. It would be nice if it were revealed in the other books. I don't know, I haven't read them yet, but it would be nice if it were revealed that the worms also consume the spice in some way, and because they consume the spice as well, that means that they get, this special power of the mind as well. That would be nice. It would be nice if it were revealed that the worms aren't just these mindless creatures. But it would be nice if the worms turned out to be more than what they appear to be. Like I always said in my other video, that it would be a great uh, decision in the writing of the story if the worms turned out to have an intellect of their own, a personality of their own, and that they could somehow communicate with Paul, because Paul has these powers, and the worms, they should have some sort of power as well, mentally, right? But it doesn't really happen in this book, which is a sad thing. I hope it gets better. You know, uh, some say that Frank Herbert's writing isn't good, and I don't agree with that. I think he is a pretty decent writer in how he formulates his prose, his sentences, his paragraphs. Nothing wrong with his dialogue, but what he kind of, stumbles here and there is it's actually telling the story and making it interesting. That's where he kind of fails, and it is apparent he fails at making this story a bit more interesting. He has a lot of slow chapters. He focuses specific chapters on specific side characters that, in my view, they don't really matter. I don't care about Duncan Idaho, Dunkin' Donuts, and Gurney Halleck and Hawat. I don't care about these characters, but they all have individual POV chapters, which is baffling to me because I don't find them that interesting, right? I don't find them that interesting. There should have been more Duke Leto in this book. That's what I keep mentioning. There should have been more Duke Leto because he had the potential of being a strong side character. He had the potential of being a Ned Stark, right? He had the potential because he is a good man. He has a good moral code, right? He is a good father. He is a good leader of his people. He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't take advantage of the Fremen people, right? He wants to ally with the Fremen people, but he is taken out too soon so that Paul can shine as the protagonist, right? Which is sad because there should have been more of him. He should have been fleshed out a little bit more, and maybe then, if he was polished a little bit more, maybe then his death would have been more dramatic or emotional, or it should have affected us, but it didn't affect me. I mean, his death came and went, right? His death wasn't really that impactful. I mean, not even Paul is really that affected by it at first. You know, he can't even cry about it, right? But that's about it. This has been another video on Dune. You know, it is a pretty decent book, right? It could have been better, but you know, it wasn't a waste of time. A lot of books are a waste of time, but this one deserves some praise for what it has accomplished, right? And I'm gonna end this video with saying it again that, you know, it's a nice thing to want to, you know, save the earth, preserve the environment, etc., etc. But it is naive, it is gullible. First of all, you know, the planet doesn't need us, right? The planet does not need us to interfere. The planet will be fine, right? If the planet chooses that one continent should be a desert, right? Then that's the way of nature. Don't interfere, leave it alone. Because these Fremen want to change nature. They want to interfere with nature, and that will have consequences, right? It should have consequences because when you go against what nature has decided, there should be consequences. And in real life, there are consequences. So let's say that you want to stop this desert, right, from advancing. So you're going to plant all of this green stuff, right? And the desert stops advancing. But nature will decide that, okay, I can't go this way. So the desert is just going to go in another direction. Okay, because nature, life, always finds a way, and man cannot do anything about it. And until people learn this lesson, they will suffer. Okay? Like George Carlin said, our only sin is that we interfered with nature. Okay? That is what has gotten us in a lot of trouble. And it will keep getting us into trouble until we learn to keep our ego in check. Because we think that we can do something about it. No, what you have to do is leave nature alone. Leave nature alone and step back. Nature knows best. Life knows best. Stop sticking your human nose where it doesn't belong. Interfering with nature has caused a lot of problems today in the real world, right? And that's what should happen in these books, right? There should be consequences to these people wanting to change nature itself and, you know, make a desert planet into a lush jungle, right? There should be serious consequences, right? But that's about it, you know. You should give it a read. It's not a bad book. It could have been better, but whatever, right? So I'll leave you with that. And, you know, if you're not going to read books, at least, you know, toke up on some spice melange, right? We need more spice melange in our lives. And that's exactly what I'm going to do now. So, see ya.